safe. And we're recording now.
Okay.
So would you like to?
Yeah, let's get started. I had a couple of announcements before we actually start. First is I just want to let everybody know about the next meetup, which is June 27th. The title is Frequency Alchemy, and we've got Elijah Parker, who's local here. He's going to talk about sound and light and how it can entrain the brain. So experience the moving mandalas and practical imagery of subliminal phoenix, learn about tools and approaches to brainwave fitness, and explore the four elemental states of focus, learning, relaxation, and rejuvenation from a biological, neurological, and energetic standpoint. I think that'll be a really fun one for everybody. I also wanted to get everybody to sign in because I want to start keeping track of who shows up versus who signs up to be here, so I can start getting some statistics on how many people to expect and who's coming on a regular basis.
We can also do that in the meetup. We can do, yeah, but we can do it on paper now. Yeah.
Just write your name down, save your email address.
And everyone in the room this evening will need to use their outside voice.
Okay.
Okay. Could you hear Mike, Claude, when he said okay?
Medium.
So a real outside voice before you were trained out of it. Yes.
If not, somebody can repeat.
I will repeat. And we've got chat open as well in case we need to use that.
Okay, so I want to introduce Dr. Poncelet. This is Claude Poncelet. He's a physicist and shamanic practitioner and teacher. He has taught shamanism in Europe, Russia, Ukraine, and North America for about 30 years, and is committed to help develop a shamanic tradition for the modern technological world. For him, there is no inconsistency between scientific and shamanic knowledge. Claude has studied shamanism with Michael Harner and with a number of shamans and spiritual teachers from diverse cultures and traditions. He has spent his professional life teaching as a university professor and working in the corporate world to protect the environment. He has served as chief liaison on 2 presidential commissions on sustainable development. He is the author of The Shaman Within, a physicist's guide to the deeper dimensions of your life, universe, and everything. As you can see, Sarah has it heavily bookmarked.
And Claude, would you like us to say our names before you begin so you know who's in the room?
That would be nice.
So I've introduced myself. I had to turn the camera around to do it.
And I'm Julie. You can't really see me, but I'm here.
She's here. That's Julie.
Hi.
And the next?
I'm Sarah Violante, and I am also signed up to take your course in Damascus in September, so I hope to see you then too. Yeah.
I'm with her. I'm Mike.
I'm Jay Mutsafi, consciousness hacking enthusiast.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Therese.
Hi.
Hi, Mary.
And in the back?
I'm Mike.
Okay. Okay, Claude, we are so ready for you.
All right. And just know that I will soon forget everybody's name. That's the privilege of aging. So let me start. And my request is, unless you have really a burning question that needs to be asked, you know, I prefer if they are asked at the end of my presentation. You know, this makes for me a little more coherence in what I can present. However, you know, feel free if you really need to stop me to do so. The request I had is to talk about shamanism in organizations and professional lives. So let me start with a overall background to that. As a scientist, I define reality as having physical dimensions, that is space, time, matter, energy. And I recognize there is also what I call a spiritual dimension to reality, and that we all have the innate capacity of connecting with that spiritual dimension. Now, how do I know this? How would you know that? I know this through direct experience, which as a physicist is for me what counts. All throughout my life, starting as a child, I've had strange, unusual experiences that one could call almost magical. Now, these occurred in nature and in everyday life. One such profound experience, by the way, occurred while I was writing my doctoral thesis in physics. And I recount some of those stories in my book. Now, I suspect that most, if not all of you here, have had similar experiences, although many of us tend to keep those to ourselves and not really share them around very much. So since childhood, I always had a sense that there was something more to the ordinary physical reality around me, and that I had access to that reality. Now, as I grew up, and particularly after those experiences that continued as a young scientist, while I could not explain those experiences using standard scientific knowledge, I could not deny or reject them or call them merely imagination without, for me, violating the foundation of science. That is, science does not reject the experience of reality, whether or not that experience fits scientific models. The scientific method, as we know, constructs models and theories of reality. And the validity and acceptance of any model depends upon its agreement and consistency with our direct experience of the physical world. Now, the final word is what the world tells us about itself, not what we think the world is like. And for me, that's the foundation of science. Now, my introduction to shamanism in the very early 1980s provided me with a framework with which I could understand all those strange occurrences that had happened throughout my life. And it confirmed my strong intuition and conviction that there is another reality which is as real as ordinary reality or physical reality. And shamanism provided me with techniques that allowed me to access that other reality anytime, anywhere, with my intention. Now, I presume that some of you may not be familiar with the shamanic tradition. Let me just say a few words about shamanism. The word shamanism has unfortunately been often misused and is still misused in either the literature or conversations or media. Now, in its many and very varied cultural forms, which vary from culture to culture, the basis of shamanism is to focus on our connection or interaction with the spiritual dimension of reality, which often is called non-ordinary reality. Now, in entering this non-ordinary reality, in an altered state of consciousness, which is often aided or facilitated by regular rhythmic drumming, the shamanic practitioners enters in contact with, learns and receives resources from so-called spirits. Now, the term spirit, which in our modern culture can sometimes evoke unease or prejudices, merely denotes the manifestation of the spiritual dimension. It's just a word of entities in the ordinary physical reality, or of forces or entities that have not incarnated in our world. In other words, when we talk about the spirit of a tree, we're talking about the spiritual dimension of that tree. Now, the term shamanic journey, which I may use probably in my talk, is a metaphorical description of such entrances and experience in non-ordinary reality. Now, for me, this non-ordinary or spiritual reality, together with the physical reality, forms a bigger reality where I put a capital R to it, in which we live our lives as human beings on this planet. Now, the physical dimensions, space-time, matter, energy, we access through our senses, and of course, oftentimes enhanced by our modern technologies, such as our work in astrophysics and cosmology. And this is what science studies. The spiritual dimension of reality is not what science studies, it's what spiritual traditions, including shamanism, focuses on. And I am personally convinced that we all have the innate capacity to access this dimension. This is what I call, of course, the Shaman Within in my book. So let me say a little bit about this spiritual dimension. Everything that is part of our world, everything that has a form, has a spiritual dimension. And this is something that we experience in the shamanic journey or the shamanic practice. Now, this is true not only for so-called living beings, such as humans and plants and animals. It's also true for other forms of nature, so-called non-living, rocks, mountains, rivers, lakes, oceans, places. It applies, by the way, to the microscopic life. It applies to the microbiome, the huge number of bacteria, viruses, fungi that inhabit our bodies. They all have a sacred dimension. But it's also true for the forms that we, humans, being parts of nature ourselves, create out of elements of the earth, such as buildings, cars, cell phones, computers, tables, institutions, organizations. These all are created by us, and we are nature, and they all have a sacred dimension. It also applies, by the way, to and this is of great interest for me as a scientist, not only to the entire planet Earth, but also to other cosmic entities, our sun, the moon, the Milky Way galaxy, other galaxies, quasars, pulsars, supernovae, black holes. They all have a sacred dimension, a spiritual dimension. Thus, for me, for a shamanic practitioner, everything in this world is sacred. And if we know this and live by this, our lives, our society can change radically. Now we know we are facing today a huge crisis, multifaceted crisis. We are destroying the Earth's ecological system, not only endangering ourselves and our descendants, but threatening the current systems upon which life on Earth depends. We're destroying one another through social injustice, war, and violence. And many of us humans are searching for meaning, often living in fear, anxiety, confusion. Now, while enlightened policies, laws, regulations, and educations, and new way of living are necessary to meet these challenges, and I spend much of my professional life on environmental policies and education, I'm convinced that it is not enough. To truly address these crises, we need again to see the sacred in everything. And this is what indigenous wisdom has always taught. The sacred in a tree, a mountain, the sacred in the other, and the sacred in a technology. Now, very quickly, if we see the sacred in a technology, it is going to be much more difficult for us to misuse that technology. If we see a sacred in a tree, it will be much more difficult for us to cut it mindlessly. And the sacred in the other, it will be much more difficult for us to have a lack of respect or justice for the other. Let me talk, before I get into organizations and professional life, talk a little bit about how we can live the sacred in everyday life. Now, we live in a world that is increasingly filled, as we all know, and you all know, with technological gadgets, procedures, systems, and environments. I'm not one to say, we need to do away with these and go back to the always. For me, what is important is to consecrate or reconsecrate the modern world we live in by being aware of, acknowledging the sacred in everything we encounter in daily life. This can change drastically the way we experience our lives by opening to joy, love, harmony, and wonder. I'd like there, because sometimes stories speak better than concepts, to share a recent experience, or in the last 3 years or so I have had, that exemplifies what I'm talking about. As some of you may know, early in January 2014, I was diagnosed with an advanced stage 4 lung cancer, which was metastasized to the brain and several vertebrae in my spine, and then since then it's gone into the spinal fluid. And I share this because this is who I am. And currently I'm doing very well, and learning a great deal about this journey. Back then, of course, this was a huge shock, given that I'm not a smoker and there's no history of cancer in my family. However, my shamanic practice, which I use daily in my journey with cancer, has been a huge support and blessing for me. Now, in February 2014, I had a radiation treatment for my brain tumors. I had 26 of them. Now, I was fortunate to, here at University of California, San Francisco, to have access to a very advanced medical procedure called gamma knife, which uses, as a physicist, I was very interested. It uses high energy gamma radiation, which is focused specifically on the tumors. That is, it comes from all directions, so that a single ray does not have enough energy to harm any healthy neuron, but they all meet exactly at the tumor where they deposit their energy. And the procedure took about 5 hours. I was immobilized, of course, with my head. There was a control room with 2 radiologists and a physicist, which I was very happy with. And after the procedure, by the way, all the 26 tumors were gone, and I went home and I did some hiking after that. Now, in preparation, by the way, to that, which is typical of how, for me, I've learned to leave the sacred. I did several shamanic journeys to prepare myself. I journeyed to the spirit of the hospital, and I journeyed to the spirit of the radiation dome that I was going to be put under, and also of the gamma radiation itself and other spirits. And I would honor them, bless them, and which is the way I usually work. I ask them for the most appropriate outcome in accordance with the greater harmony of the whole, and I ask for them to support me. Now, when the procedure started, I again journeyed to the spirit of gamma radiation. Well, in early journeys, I couldn't quite distinguish the form of the spirit. The spirits have no form, that they show themselves in a given form, which is often a message. This time, the spirit showed itself clearly as an elder woman. And I asked for guidance now that I was undergoing the procedure. It's very quiet underneath. No, you don't hear anything in that. And everybody's left the room where the radiation dome is, so I'm all alone. Now, the spirit immediately reminded me that right after the Big Bang, that is the creation of the universe, and by the way, cosmology is one of my passions in physics, the first manifestation of matter or energy was in the form of high energy electromagnetic radiation, that is gamma rays. This is the first thing that materialized out of the initial fields created by the Big Bang. Now, some of the gamma rays, described by Einstein equation, E energy equal mc square, energy can be converted into mass, and vice versa. Some of those gamma rays were transformed into matter and antimatter, with the matter, that is the quarks, electrons, became the building blocks of atoms, molecules, stars, planets, and our own bodies. And the spirit of gamma radiation told me, you are being healed by your cosmic ancestors. Now, we all came down from those primordial gamma rays. Everything we have in our body came down from then, nowhere else. The quarks and the electrons all came from them. Now, hearing this, brought a fundamental change for the medical procedure I was undertaking. I was no longer bombarded by radiation with all the scary aspects that has. My cosmic ancestors were healing me, and this was a sacred treatment for me. And this full realization, made the 5 hours in the dome filled with wonder, gratitude, and I know the same can happen with every one of our experience. Connecting with the sacred, make us not only understand the true nature of life and reality, but also reframe, if you wish, our belief systems, or judgments, or analysis by the mind and the ego. And I'm sure this contributed to my healing, the fact that I was so open to it. Let me turn now to the sacred in professional life, and I presume most of you are involved in some form of professional life and in organizations.
Thank you for the story.
Now, part of my professional life, after, against the advice of everybody, I left my university post, having been given tenure and full professorship. But I wanted to work in the mainstream. This was back in the 70s and 80s, very interested in environmental and energy policies. And so I worked part of my life for a large energy corporation for protection of the environment. And for many years, spirits taught me ways to consecrate my professional work. Now, I asked myself, okay, how am I going to do what I've been doing in ordinary reality in my professional life? And there was no book saying anything about that or anybody I could talk to. And so I turned to spirits and asked them to teach me. And for many ways, they taught me how to consecrate my professional life in a large organization. And by the way, my first thought, of course, this coming from my ego and my mind, had been, oh, I've got to teach shamanism to some of my colleagues, or I got to create a shamanic workshop for professional business people, And I was quickly told, no. You got to concentrate on yourself, and yourself then see the sacred in everything we do. These practices, which I carried then for years doing my everyday work in the organizations, needed by necessity, of course, to be very different than the way the practices I used in my normal shamanic practice. They needed to be short, low key, so that I could do them while at work, so that I could do that during meetings, while talking to colleagues, when I was leading a meeting myself, talking with clients, to consultants. And again, in my book, I do describe a lot of these practices. Let me say that critical to practicing shamanism in an organization, particularly a large corporate organization, are several things. One is to maintain the integrity and essence of the traditional shamanic practice. That is, that there is a spiritual dimension to reality, that we have access to that dimension, to those spirits. By the way, void of any of the cultural, what I call liturgical aspect of shamanic, which is shamanism where usually people focus on, which are really just not the essence, not just feathers and paraphernalia and these kinds of things, which really are not the essence of shamanism. The other one is, which for me is extremely important, is the question of ethics in practicing shamanism in organization. One needs to have a very clear and pure attention aligned with the greater good of the whole, not driven by our ego. Who are we to know what is a good outcome for any project that is undergone by an organization? When we seek help from spirit, we seek the greater good of the whole. And I think it's very important. It puts us away from our ego. Now, we must be aware in that sense of the potential for abuse of power and narcissism, which, and I know that because personally, it's always there. and, wants to pick its head up. So we need to let go of our beliefs, of our judgments about the organization or anything else we do. Now this is our ego interfering, and it renders our work really ineffective. The last aspects of ethics, and I always focus on these because they're so important to me, is that before we perform any work, shamanic work, on somebody else, on an organization and whatnot, we need their permission. And we need permissions from spirits. And so, as I'll explain a bit later, when I'll give an example of a practice I've used in organization and I still use, is that what you can do is to do a practice which is an offering, not something you want to impose, no manipulation here. This is something, energy that you offer, and those that are ready and wanting to use it will. Those that do not, do not. And so that's very important to do it that way. So there is no manipulation. I always emphasize that shamanism is not about obtaining power. And very often that's the way it's presented. It's about the reconsecration of life. That's all that is. Now the practices I learned from spirits were of two major kinds. One was to work with what I've called non-traditional spirits and seek their help and guidance and knowledge. And then there were special practices that I was given that are adopted for the work environment, and I'll describe at least one of those. Now, a non-traditional spirit, a non-traditional in the sense that it's not something that is typically done in the practice of shamanism, is to contact spirits of organizations. Organizations have a spirit. We as an individual have our own sacred dimension, which is called the soul, or our pure essence, or our pure consciousness. When we get a group together, that is, there's a spirit of the group. And often there's journeys to a group spirit. Tribes, traditionally in indigenous cultures, talk about the spirit of the tribe. Well, a large organization is made up of a number of people. It has a spirit also, and often neglected and not thought about, but it's there. In addition to other non-traditional spirits, I've mentioned some of them, but certainly, spirit of a room, of a city, of a building, all these can be good guides to get support or guidance. As a quick example, when I joined that large energy corporation, I did some initial journeys to the spirit of that organization. I just wanted to learn a little bit more about its essential nature. Now, I had my own judgments and beliefs and thoughts about that organization. I wanted to let it go and see more about the fundamental basis. And I learned a great deal. And I saw the bigger picture of that organization, letting go of the dysfunctions or what I would have critiqued or judged before, which exist. But there is also a more fundamental aspect to it. And this is what I was able to learn. Well, this helps me shed those prejudices And it doesn't mean you agree with an organization. I mean, I've been at odds and had a lot of arguments and conflicts with say oil companies in terms of their impact on the environment. Well, I've always journeyed to the streets of those oil companies, you know, it doesn't mean that I agree with anything the organization itself does. But at least I can honor and bless the sacredness of that organization, even if it's not manifested by the people there. It's similar to, for me, my understanding of an individual. We all have a sacred, pure, spiritual dimension, which is our soul. You know, so did Hitler. You know, none of, as far as I'm concerned, you know, and my father spent time in concentration camps. He was during World War II, he was part of the resistance. So I had a lot of anger toward the Nazis. And yet, you know, the man, if I disagreed with everything he did, still has a pure soul, even though it is not at all manifested, you know, through his incarnation. And so it's important. It's the same for organizations. And of course, you know, once you do that, you find that all organizations have certain things that are good about them, and that's where you want to focus on. So these are some examples. Now, the special practices. You know, I've asked spirits, and sometimes they've given those to me without my asking. And there are various types. I was given general practices. For example, one would be to bring harmony to a situation, to a meeting, to a group, to an issue and whatnot. And there was, and these practices are very quick, very short. And I'll give you an example of that one. There are also practices that I was given for specific purposes. For example, you know, solving a particular problem, assisting a group to find clarity on an issue. Now, certain things that are, and again, these are all offerings that you make when you do these practices. And it's up to people whether they, you know, use the energy or not. Again, no, it's not ethical for us to want to impose or manipulate anything. That is not possible. Let me give you an example, and I'll end on that, of one such practice. And by the way, in my book, I don't want this to be a marketing effort, but I do describe a lot of these practices that I've learned from spirits. Now, one practice which I've used very often, I call it word doctoring. The word, W-O-R-D, doctoring. And it has for purpose to help bring about harmony, the one I mentioned, to a situation or event, again, in accordance with the greatest well-being of the whole. Now, the practice which I can do while in a meeting, which is this practice, even if I'm talking and whatnot, consists in quickly acknowledging the four elements, water, earth, air, and fire, and the four directions. And, you know, for me, it's very quick, you know, acknowledging water. I have a glass of water on my table, or it's my saliva, not the fire. I look at the light. You know, it's air, you know, it's my breathing. The earth, you know, I tap my foot on the ground. Everything can be very quick. And I let the four directions. And then what I ask spirit is that they give me one sacred word, a sacred word. And the word, comes very quickly to me, right away in my mind. And the sacred word would then offer the possibility of more harmony to anyone, who hears and feels the energy and wants to accept it. Most people are unconscious doing this, somehow relatively conscious because they've talked to me afterwards. But it's an offer. And I like this practice because my ancestral heritage is Celtic from the part of Belgium I was born in, which is of a Celtic background. And one of the practices that my Celtic shamanic ancestors used in healing or divination was the use of sacred words or sacred incantation or sounds. And so to me, I said, oh my gosh, no, I like this. Now, usually, by the way, the word has nothing to do with the situation at hand. Now, the spirits, by the way, if you practice shamanism, have a sense of humor. And so they gave me a challenge. And it's sometimes a bit difficult and fun to insert that word in a sentence while I'm talking to the group, as if, there's nothing strange. I don't want anybody to notice anything strange in that, Now, I'd like to give an example of that. Years ago, as was mentioned earlier, I served as a chief staff liaison on President Clinton's presidential Council on Sustainable Development. The objective of that council, by the way, was to develop a blueprint for a sustainable America, integrating economic, environmental, and social equity concerns. We met formally every 3 months for 2 or 3 days, usually in Washington. And on the council were 10 corporate CEOs from major corporations, 10 leaders of environmental and social justice organizations, SARA, Claude Poncelet, DC, EDF, and others. And there were 5 cabinet secretaries, energy, transportation, and others. And the council was chaired by then Vice President Al Gore. And I used the word doctoring practice during one of these meetings. And if I may, because I give the account of that in my book, I'd like to read that because it'll give you an idea of how you can, even in a setting like that, practice shamanism. So let me read that from my book. So it is, we had been meeting for about 2 years, and an issue that appeared intractable was threatening to break the group apart and unravel the council's hard-won consensus work. And the issue was the old one of growth versus no growth. Now, the environmental and community leaders, as well as Mr. Gore and some of the cabinet secretaries, argued for continued growth. Not Al Gore, but some of the cabinet secretaries argued for argued that continued growth in the rate of resource use and in the economy made it impossible to reach a sustainable society. We used too many resources, we kept growing economically, this would not work. Now the corporate leaders and the remaining of the cabinet secretaries argued that continued growth was essential if we wanted to provide economic well-being for everyone and jobs, eliminate poverty, and have the financial resources to protect the environment. Now, a critical two-day meeting took place in an ornate conference room in the Department of Commerce building in Washington. If you've ever been in that building, it's a huge marble-laced building. Now, the future of the council really appeared to be at stake. Now, I used everything in my bag of practices to implore spirit to help. I worked with the spirits of the room we were building, the spirit of the building, the spirit of the Department of Commerce, the spirit of the council, the spirit of the city of Washington, all asking them for help in keeping the council alive. Now, during this big meeting's first session, I used the word doctoring practice to help bring harmony to the situation. Now, I did not take sides in doing so, growth or no growth. It was very important for me to stay totally without judgments or beliefs in making my plea to spirits. I only asked for harmony and the most appropriate outcome for the welfare of the whole. Now, the word I received immediately, by the way, was rainbow. Now, not an easy word to introduce among such an august group. And I remember at one point saying something like this. I said, sometimes I have the feeling that sustainability is like looking for the treasure at the end of the rainbow. And this led to some approving laughter. And nobody noticed, anything. Now, by the end of the meeting, a breakthrough, as surprising as it was welcome, saved the day and the future of the council. The group realized and agreed that the growth, no growth debate was a false and ill-defined one. That to reach a sustainable and just society, some things must grow while others must not. For example, it was agreed that it was important that pollution, toxic contamination, poverty, natural resource depletion do not grow. And everybody agreed on that. And it is important that quality of life, environmental health, open space, savings, and why not profits grow, as long as these other things do not grow. And once this resolution was reached and agreed upon, the council was able to productively concentrate on developing policy recommendations that would lead to these outcomes simultaneously. And let me end by saying that whether the shift was linked to the practice, for me, is irrelevant. The point was, for me, having been taught that to do the practice, that was my job, and if there's any credit, it all goes to the spirits, and so let me end here and see if you have any questions, and I'm open to any question. I may not necessarily have all the answers.
Claude, I don't think you heard it, but after you told the story about the gamma radiation, someone in the room just wanted to thank you for the story because she thought it was so good.
Oh, thank you. It's and in my healing, by the way, I continue to use my shamanic practice in many ways.
That was a lot of information.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
No, I cannot. I hear your voice, but not what you're saying.
He's frozen.
Just what?
Right when there's questions.
Oh,
Okay.
there he is. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Go ahead.
Do you want to?
Yes, he can hear you, but he can't see you. Okay.
You said at the beginning that you had a and I wrote it down on my phone. You said you had a framework for your shamanism practice, and I'm wondering how do you reconcile your shaman practices and your science practices?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Does that make sense?
The answer is yes, and let me talk a little bit about that. And as was said when I was introduced, for me, I see no inconsistencies between shamanic knowledge and scientific knowledge. Again, let me say a few words on that. This bigger reality, which for me is a reality which has a physical dimension and a spiritual dimension. Science studies that reality, looks at it through one window. Shamanism and other spiritual tradition are looking at that reality through another window. And so science cannot explain shamanism or spiritual traditions, spiritual experiences. And spiritual traditions and shamanism cannot explain the physical world. They each have their own domain, if you wish. Now, there is nothing in science, and every scientist I've talked to ultimately agrees with this. There is nothing in science that says that there cannot be another dimension of reality that are not accessible to science. There's nothing wrong in the scientific model and tradition to say, yes, there is a domain that science does not access. And science accept that. Nothing in science says otherwise. Now, some scientists may say that science will ultimately explain everything, but that's an opinion. The foundation of science accepts that there may be things that science does not have access to. However, both shamanism, to talk about shamanism, and science are looking at the same broader reality with a capital R, even though through different windows. So there must be consistency between the two. If it's good shamanism, it's good spiritual practice, and if it's good science. What I've seen in here is that there are actually a lot of synchronicities and reciprocities between scientific knowledge and shamanic knowledge, which I would expect because they are looking at the same reality. And these I call metaphors. Now, there's a lot of scientific models or explanation of the physical world that have provided for me, and I talk a little bit about that in the book, excellent metaphors for what we are trying to learn spiritually or through the shamanic experience. A lot of my shamanic experience, I've been able to understand better when I used a scientific metaphor for that. let me mention a very recent metaphor that's been very helpful for me and that I've used in presentation recently. I've made past 2 years presentation at the international annual meeting of the Science and Non-Duality Conference. If some of you are familiar with that organization, which really tries to tie science and non-dual wisdom. And their focus over the past few years have been on consciousness and understanding the nature of consciousness, which your organization, I think, has interest also in. And one of the disagreements I've had with a lot of what I've heard of that conference is that there is a lot of anthropocentrism, I call, in the study of human consciousness, in the sense that it is studied, analyzed in isolation of the rest of the world, and so it's very focused on just human consciousness. In my shamanic experience, and it's been even more true since throughout my journey with cancer. Animals and plants have an amazing level of consciousness, and maybe a lot of you shaking your heads agree with that, and certainly even science itself. Zoology and biology is getting in the past 10, 15 years to, in the mainstream, to acknowledge the intelligence of other species. For centuries, we denied the intelligence of other species. Anthropocentrism humans had intelligence. Now it's moving slowly into consciousness. One of the problems there, again, is still anthropocentric, is that we compare an animal intelligence with ours. Ours is kind of the standard. Oh, they do like us. So, maybe they have a very, and that's my experience, they have a very different consciousness and intelligence. And by the way, I won't go into this in detail, but in just the last 2 years, I've had amazing, totally unexpected healings given to me by animals, while rubbing my chest with the rider trying to get him away, and that horse knew I had lung cancer. I have a raven do the same thing, come, this close to me, and they know I had cancer, the rider on the horse didn't. So there's an intelligence there that's different from ours, And so for me, given my understanding that to experience that there is consciousness out there, as a scientist, for those of you familiar with systems theory, you cannot analyze something in isolation of the system if you really want to understand it, and which has happened over the past centuries a lot with our scientific approach, but we're getting away from that. And so for me to study human consciousness without studying the consciousness of other species, is, you can't get very far. And the metaphor I've used for trying to understand this consciousness, and by the way, if you talk to indigenous people, they talk about the consciousness of a rock, the consciousness of water, and so even so-called non-living entities have consciousness. And for those familiar with the recent discovery of the Higgs boson, in CERN a few years ago, a big discovery, because its existence had been predicted over 50 years ago and ever looked upon. And there was something missing in the standard theory of particle physics, is that there was no explanation why particles have mass and have a specific mass. And so the theory that had been advanced by Mr. Higgs or Professor Higgs and others was that there was a field, the Higgs field, that permeated all space, which provided mass to individual particles. And this field at sufficient energy, can manifest itself as a particle, a boson, a Higgs boson. And it was finally identified and therefore proving that theory of the Higgs field providing mass. So there was a big plus for physics. Now, I've used that metaphor for consciousness. To me, that's been very helpful. So now I see a consciousness field filling all of the universe, and just like an electron gets a specific mass and a quark get a different mass, etc. Well, we are in that field, and we humans, with our brain, we get a specific consciousness from that field, and the horse gets a specific consciousness from that field. And so there's a plant or a rock and whatnot. So for me, this consciousness field has been a very helpful concept based on the Higgs field metaphor. This is where, there can be these synchronicities, if you wish, very useful metaphors. And in terms of the other way, what can spirituality bring to science? And again, if you read a lot of history of science, many of the great discoveries, have come through insights or intuition, where suddenly something, my gosh, I've got it, and then they spend the rest of their professional life trying to put that into equations. There's been often, discussions, how does that intuition, it's usually called intuition, including Einstein's intuition about the general theory of relativity. And my hypothesis is just that by getting into a total state of consciousness where we become aware of the spiritual as well as the physical dimension of reality, we're open more to intuition, to insight about that reality. And that maybe that's the way, often unconsciously, that these kinds of intuition comes. But these are fields to explore. But I hope this gives an example of why, for me, science and shamanism or spirituality really can reinforce one another.
Claude, I think we have another question.
Yes, hi. One thing that I heard that was very
I can't hear you well.
It's echo.
One thing that I've heard very consistent in the ethereal, mystical, spiritual levels that you've described in every one of your descriptions is energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wonder if you could really talk about the consistency of energy through consciousness, through the brain and the elements, and looking at even the ethereal, which is we call the Ethernet, you can say that, our spiritual world, which is we use our brains to have a view, a personal view of the spirits. And so, as well as with all of nature, a German word that I know of, immer, which means all. It's one of my favorite words because it's all inclusive. There is nothing separating anything from that word.
What was the word?
Imma?
Immer, I-M-M-E-R.
Imma.
Yeah, I-M-M-E-R.
Yeah. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to making that a little bit more tangible for us, because in much of my readings, when you talk about the ethereal, it's not tangible. We can't think of it. And people who are not connecting with it can't grasp it. So can you bring that to a level, you know, the spiritual, the ether, to more that energy level that maybe we could all understand and grasp? Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful and a huge question. And so, you know, first of all, I don't have a totally clear answer to that, but let me give you, I've wrestled with that question myself practically all my life. So let me, and keep doing it. So let me tell you what, you know, my thought on that, and hopefully that will help you also. First of all, you know, I'm very conscious that, you know, we are using words such as energy and ether and other things that are very vaguely defined and have been introduced to describe ordinary physical reality. And so they're not, and that's a problem with any spiritual experience and shamanic experience, is that we don't have the language to talk about it. And so we try to use the ordinary physical reality language, you know, to make sense of it. So, you know, I'm always aware that even when I use the word energy, I know that, you know, that's not an adequate description of it. It's, you know, it gives a sense maybe, but, you know, people use vibrations, frequencies, you know, and you know, none of those really fully address, which is why in my sense, it is important for us to experience. You know, I cannot tell you what a shamanic experience is. I can try to describe it to you. Only if you have it yourself will you know it. You know, so that's also something very, very important. Let me say also that you know, the experiences of the ethereal world, the oneness, you know, a lot of what people in non-dual wisdom talk about, I don't think can ever be described fully. And my experience in shamanically is this: when I have a shamanic experience, and I've had some very deep shamanic experience, really getting close to knowing the wholeness of the world, knowing the total interconnectedness, all that, as far as I know, does not have any visual, auditory, sensory aspect to it, or kinesthetic. A shamanic journey gives you information, messages, visions, understanding, knowledge that is provided to you in a totally formless way. Now, the spiritual world the spiritual world is totally formless. There's no space, no time, no dimensions, no matter. So when we talk about journeying in the spiritual world, that is again a total metaphor, because there is no form. When a spirit shows itself to me in a certain form, like the gamma rays of the elder woman, that's the form I see. It does not have a form. And that's, a non-dual wisdom tradition really talk about that formlessness quite a bit. Now, what I understand, and this is my understanding, is happening to me when I have those experiences is that my brain and is that Mike your name?
It's Mike, and he has a follow-up question too.
Not only is my brain involved, but my whole body is involved. Okay, I believe that my entire body, all my cells, all have a wisdom and participate in this, and the brain with a very special role, but the rest of the body also. And my understanding is that the message, the information, the knowledge I get is translated by my body, brain, and body, mind, my brain into ordinary reality types of either visual things or words that are used for ordinary reality, and maybe kinesthetic or sensorial signs, but it is a translation. And when I teach shamanism, I always emphasize, and this is where a lot of practices is necessary before one becomes impeccable in the shamanic work, is that the translation be as pure as possible without the ego interfering. Which is so easy. One of the non-dual wisdom teachers called Adyashanti talks about the spiritual ego. I call it the shamanic ego. It's part of the ego, but it projects itself as a spiritual ego. It uses all the right words and the right paraphernalia, etc., etc. It's the ego, and it interferes very often with those translations. So that it becomes an interpretation rather than a translation. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say that it's formless spirit, and you talk and what I mean by the ethereal and ether, an analogy that I look at is dark matter. And we know dark matter exists. We see the impact of it.
Yeah.
But yet it's not there. There's nothing. You can't see anything. Exactly what you were just explaining. And so, when we look at dark matter and what we look at in space when we read our astrology or cosmos, that's what I kind of align it to, is dark matter. But yet it's something where there's energy in that dark matter. There's also energy in the spirit, and each individual creates that spirit and that energy through its own thoughts and its ability to be present. So that was just my follow-up that I kind of got what you were talking.
And dark matter, maybe a metaphor, and I've journeyed, by the way, to the state of dark matter and have a connection with it. And the same for dark energy. We don't know what these things are. We know they have an effect, which is a physical effect. Dark matter has a gravitational effect, no question about that. And so for me, it's a little early to say maybe we haven't been clever enough to find out what it really is, and so that, which keeps young physicists very happy. So there's more things to do. And but yeah.
Okay. I was interested. Did you have a question? No? Yes?
A little louder.
Yeah. So I have the question about the nature of the sacredness of technology, which really
Yeah.
fascinates me. Can you say more about that? There are a few of us in the room who have spent decades working on technology, and the environments don't always feel sacred in which that stuff is built in. But we'd like to make them a little more sacred. So can you say more about the sacredness of technology?
Well, yeah. Let me start with some personal experience, and then maybe we can, if that doesn't quite answer, talk some more. But as a physicist, I've been a theoretical physicist, so I haven't been in the process of developing and constructing I'm closing my phone there. My computer right here that I'm looking at and seeing all of your beautiful faces. Whenever I open my computer, I journey and do this very quickly. I just acknowledge the spirit of my computer and become a friend, and acknowledge, bless it, honor it, and that's all you have to do. It's thank you, honor it and whatnot. And I find that, and then throughout when I use my computer, writing an email, I call the spirit of the computer and say, oh, help me do this correctly. I don't want to be nasty in my email. Let me do this right. And so I think the way I use my computer, hopefully, is more harmonious, more loving, than otherwise. So it's the use of the technology which for me is so important. Now I do the same thing whenever I drive my car. I contact and honor the spirit of my car and ask, the spirit to help me, drive this as harmoniously as I can. And I find that it helps me get less irritated at other drivers, and I do those kinds of things. So in every use of our technologies, it's the same way. I mean, I've learned to, not become addicted, if you wish, to my cell phones and my other digital technologies. And I think that by recognizing, their spirit, their sacredness, my relationship is different. An addiction to it for me would be, disrespectful of their spirit. So for me, it's more in the use of the technology. Personally, once I'm given a technology, now the whole aspect of developing a technology, is which I've not been involved in, but I think would be a great area to explore. When one is developing a new gadget or an improved gadget, is to journey to the spirit of that technology and ask to be guided, so that the most helpful technology can come out of this. And so I don't know if that answers.
The impression it's leaving with me is that it's the human who is imbuing the technology with the sacred, not that the sacred is resident in the technology.
That's not quite the way I would see it. For me, everything in this computer came from Mother Earth. All the atoms, everything is from Mother Earth. There's nowhere else that you come. We've manipulated that, just like nature, manipulates certain things to create, a rock or to create a mountain or a tree or whatever. It's just the same thing. We may be a little more messy, but it's still all sacred. So for me, the sacredness is there. It's a way of acknowledging it, honoring it, and by doing that, then you really help manifest it. And so we don't. That's where I use the word consecrate. Which really mean, consecrate is bringing out the sacred in something, Khan being with us. We are the one who honor it and recognizes, become aware of it. It's always there. But if we're going to have an interaction with that technology, it's so important for us to consecrate it. And again, that helps our mind, our ego, to say, "Oh, this is sacred."
So it's sacred because it is related to the earth, not because it was created by certain people. It's not because it's the relationship with the humans who created it. It's the relationship with the earth.
Everything that takes form, on this planet and elsewhere, is sacred because it has the sacred element of the earth in it. And I mean, there's a big mystery there. And this is a mystery that I think we need to accept. Let me talk about our own bodies. We have a spirit or soul, and every cell, which are trillions of them in our bodies, each are alive and each have a spirit. Okay, so that gets a little bit confused. It's the same thing with our computer. Everything that makes it a spirit, and the whole form has a spirit. Now, this is the similar to what our minds will never understand, and that is that again in non-dual wisdom, I am an individual. Humans on this planet, and I am part of the whole. I'm part of the whole universe, of the unity. Both are true. And our mind have difficulty, with these kinds of polarities, And these polarities are very important. I use one in my healing. People see me, they don't, and the way I live my life, not like I had cancer. So, I do not have cancer, and I have cancer. They're both true at the same time. Again, the mind cannot deal with that, but the body can, the heart can deal with those things. And so it's kind of the same thing in terms of a form. The every element coming from the earth is sacred as a spirit, and all put together is a form, like a human form, and it has a spirit. I don't know if that there's a lot of mystery there, but that's, as you know, we have more bacteria and viruses and fungi in our bodies than that we have cells. About 10 times more of them, and and actually, if you put all the genetic material together, there's 25 more genetic diversity in the microbiome, all these biomes in our body than our own genome, and so we ourselves are not even we're an ecosystem ourselves. Who are we? Are we humans, or are we, a system combining viruses, bacteria, fungi? Well, they're all alive, and they're part of us. We couldn't live without them. So, these are all kind of mysteries, of individual and the whole being one and the same, and yet being different. So I can't say very much more than that, but the same applies to any technology that we put together.
So I'm now bursting with questions. So somebody else better ask a question.
Well,
Okay.
I'll come close.
Okay. Gonna have someone else come up and ask a question.
So I want to thank you for the book because it's really meant a lot to me. So thank you very much. I recommend it to a million people, even when they are not into shamanic work at all.
Thank you.
I have studied shamanic journey meditation for 17 years and have studied formally, and I'm a practitioner. And one of the things that I think sets your book apart, aside from the second half of it that really starts to talk about how to integrate this into work and your life and everyday things, is that it really spends a lot of time talking about integrity and authenticity and impeccability and ethics. And I see as shamanic work gets more popular, and as I see that there are more and more places and more people, it's growing and people are running classes and people are very interested in this, that there's a very big lack of talking about the ethics around it. And you would talk about that energy manipulation that Mother Earth does and the manipulations that we do with each other. And so the ethics become really important. And I'm wondering if the reason you spend so much time on this is that you also are seeing a growing need to have this discussion, especially in the field of shamanic work, but just then generally overall, when people start to lightly delve into it, and then without this impeccability of practice, start to implement things almost like, swinging a sledgehammer around. So I'm wondering what your thoughts around some of that are.
Well, thank you. And I agree, fully with you. And it's, it is unfortunate that indeed, and it's not only the shamanism, but it also applies to other, spiritual traditions or new age spiritual traditions or others that really are lacking, the what I call impeccability and ethics certainly. And so, that's very much, I think, part of our Western culture at this point. I think it reflects, that's my opinion, it reflects our disregard for how we impact the environment, how we impact others. We are very sloppy in the way we live. Let's face it. As I say in my book, are we really the most advanced species at the top of the evolution? As a scientist, I look at the impact we have, and I don't see us as a very advanced, evolved species. if we're threatening the very web of life, that's not the mark of a very advanced species. And, you know, and so, you know, there is, and a lot of that comes from, you know, from Western culture that has also, you know, influenced much of the rest of the world. You know, I spent a lot of time with indigenous tribes, and recently, because I do get special healing from an Amazon shaman, rainforest shaman, who gives me some special plant medicine. So I spent time deep in the Amazon, in his village, receiving healing there. I'm very grateful. And, you know, it is, you know, these are cultures untouched really by Western civilization. You know, they have such, the ethics as well as the communication with spirits is such a natural part of living for them. They don't have a word for ethics. They don't have a word for spiritual practice. When I talk about that, I try to find a word. You mean living? You know, that's what they call it. That's life. Life is ethics. Life is, you know, being spiritual, and so you know, we've lost a lot of that, and you know, and it's, you know, and you know, part of my you know, call in the book is that, you know, we need to see the sacred again in everything, and I think if we see that, you know, I think we're going to get back to that, which is in us, by the way. I'm convinced of that. We all have that in us. We're still all indigenous in that sense, you know, but we need to open up to recover that. You know, and you know, I'm optimistic that we are going to get there. You know, in my earlier days, I've changed a bit, but I even wondered as a scientist, you know, are we a flawed species? You know, there have been flawed species in the evolutionary trees, you know, and they've gone extinct. You know, maybe are we a flawed species? There's something wrong in our brain or something like that that's evolved the wrong way, you know. I mean, you know, you look at whales, dolphins, elephants, they have bigger brains than we do, you know. Even if you take brain mass by total mass of the body, they're still bigger than ours, you know. You know, they don't behave like we do, you know. And so, but you know, I see, at the same time, I've seen so much goodness and so much harmony and so much impeccability in my travel around the world, you know. And these are things that you know, and there may be more people there than there are people that have lost that, and that's what gives me hope. You know, but you know, these are not people that are talked about when they get in the news or that. But so I don't know if that answers your questions, but you know, yes, it's you know, we need all to talk about that. I mean, and I've really, you know, in all my shamanic teaching, that I spend a lot of time emphasizing that. So do some other shamanic teachers. You know, it's.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we have more questions? 15 minutes. Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. It's been nice to talk to you. And this is a good technology.
Yes,
We're able to connect this way. So we want to thank the spirit of the Zoom technology.
yeah, yeah. So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. And, you know, if you want to, if you have questions, you can always email me.
Good.
You know, or send a note on my website. And, you know, I'm taking care of my health is my priority. Sometimes, you know, I'm slow answering, but I will. So please, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.